Good morning, everybody. My name is Nicolle Pangis. I'm the CEO of NCC Media. But I have a caveat. I'm a digital girl that just moved into the TV world 6 months ago. So I'm going to talk about addressable and sort of this marriage of linear and addressable, but I'm doing it from a lens from whence I came, because I think we are at this crossroads in the industry, which I think we all agree. If you're in this room, I think everybody has sort of common feeling that we're sort of bridging the gap between two worlds. And because I came from the digital side and I've built technology for a lot of my career, I have some thoughts on that I'd like to share with you. But a little bit about NCC, because if you are like me, when they called me for the job, I'd never heard of it, and I was based in the United States. And so my guess is that the folks in this room may not know us. NCC has been around for about 30 years, actually. And the reason it was formed is that in the United States, and much like many countries in EMEA as well, each distributor in the United States had a footprint in multiple regions. But there was no way for a buyer of media, even 20, 30 years ago, to get an easy way to buy across all of the broadcast networks on a national level, because everybody just could sell their footprint. So from a buy side, you had to work with 7, 8, 9, 10 different companies in order to get a national footprint buy. So NCC was actually created, and it's a joint venture between distributors in the United States, and the owners of the JV have changed over time with acquisitions and mergers. It's currently owned by Comcast, Spectrum, and Cox, so 3 of the biggest, but we actually are the only company that represents every MVPD, every satellite, and every telco in America. And so we essentially stitch together a national footprint for the buy side that others do not across all the broadcast networks. So right now, in 2018, we're working with 2,000 brands, $2.1 billion. So my joke is it's the biggest TV company you've never heard of in the United States, because we're pretty sizable. Definitely not the biggest, but 2.1 billion isn't small. And but we've sort of done it, I think, very, very quietly so far. So I want to talk about, again, taking my sort of digital background. There is a huge opportunity, I think we all know, in television as it becomes more data-driven. And I think there's this discussion about TV is becoming data-driven. I think that's an incorrect way of thinking about it. TV has always been data-driven. It's just been data-driven in a different way, right? TV is always, in every region, every country in the world, there's ways to measure an audience that you're reaching in television, right? But typically it's been via panel, which was the best way that we can do it. I think this seismic change that we all see is that it's not that all of a sudden data is coming to TV, it's that census level data is coming to TV, which never existed before at scale. And it's happening globally. And that gives us the ability to target in television ways we've never been able to do before. What I don't think it means, though, and there were some discussions a couple of days ago, I was at the EGTA conference, and I know that there was some discussion about it yesterday, too. It doesn't mean that TV needs to become a vehicle for performance only or branding only, but it does mean that TV can really play a role across the entirety of the funnel in a way that it hasn't been able to prove before. Because I actually think it's been doing it, there was just no measurability around it. So I'll talk a little bit about more about that. So what has TV brought that's made it, in the United States alone, a $70 billion industry? Well, it's brought a huge amount of reach beyond any of the major digital platforms. TV reaches more consumers than all the global platforms, period, end of story. It's brought a level of quality content that is unparalleled still, right? And it's brought an incredible level of engagement with audiences. So those are sort of the traditional legacy characteristics of television, all fantastic. So given how amazing that is, why has digital, from an incremental dollar, pound, euro perspective, been able to take the incremental money coming into the market? Well, the reasons are right there, right? Digital, I was one of these people, kind of stole the money from TV, right? Or the incremental money, at least, in that we said, hey, look, you know what TV can't do? TV can't target in the way we can, because we could target by consumers, right? We can target by devices, and we can show the funnel. And because we showed the data and the measurement, we said we got attribution, we got performance that actually probably came from TV. It's just we could actually show it because we had the click, right? And we had the cart after the click that we could show an attribution, right? But what we didn't see is what happened before the person clicked, right? And so for those folks who may know the name Erwin Gottlieb, who up until recently was the chairman of Group M globally, he used to say, when Mercedes as a brand, right? Nobody wakes up one day when they're 35 years old and can afford a Mercedes, suddenly wanting to buy a Mercedes, right? What Mercedes has to do is actually start targeting people when they're 12, even though it sounds young, and then 15, and then 16, and then in college, and then when they're out of college but they don't have enough money to buy one, and then maybe in their 30s or 40s or 50s, depending, suddenly they can actually afford one, and they have that muscle memory, right? They've built that brand awareness to want the Mercedes, right? It's a perfect example of that. And so the digital side was actually taking the credit for that, right? Because the click to the test drive, for example, was taken by digital, and that's why all the money was moving, right? And so the huge opportunity in television is that now that TV is becoming more measurable in the way that digital is not to make it look like digital, because there's a lot of things that we did wrong in digital, right? Like the consumer experience went downhill very, very quickly. There's fraud. I ran an ad server for a period of time in my career. We had supply side publishers putting 8 banners on a page so that they could sort of maximize revenue. These are things we should not repeat, obviously, right? But there are things that we can learn, right? And there are things that we can take and bring into the TV world. And so this marriage of taking what has been the biggest value proposition in television that digital cannot compete with, but folding in the value proposition of digital, which is as important in the world that we live in now, right? Because brands are constrained by budget, so it's really, really important to show that what we're doing from an advertising perspective is working, right? So you have to be able to measure it as effectively as possible. So how did the digital folks do it? Well, we, I think, respectfully, overcomplicate things a lot in our industry. And so really, if you think about it, the major global platforms in digital look something like this. And by the way, my email's at the end of this presentation. If anybody wants any of these slides, I'm happy to send them, so just email later. So there's really just a few components that make up these really huge digital platforms. But they made it so easy for the buy side to access supply at scale. So how did they do that? 3 things, really. I mean, there's a little bit more underneath this, but there was a simple UI that was exposed to the buy side, right? That they could effectively look at audiences fragmented across many, many different supply sources and aggregate it, at least optically aggregate it into a user interface, right? Made it really, really easy to buy. 2 is that there was scaled data. So the only way that the buy side can actually find the audiences that they want is to have a huge amount of data between demand and supply that's consistent. Consistency is really important. Fragmentation of data is useless, which is one of, actually, I'll talk about in a second, but one of the problems I see in TV is that there's too much fragmentation in how data is surfaced, and the only way as an industry we're going to be successful to make the buy side and sell side less frictionless is to actually work together as an industry to make that central data layer look as close to the same as possible between suppliers. It's tricky, but it's doable. And then an ID, right? Because you need to be able to actually know that the person that you want to target from the buy side is actually the person that you're looking to target on the sell side, right? So consistency in the ID layer. If you have consistency on that top piece of the slide, that allows the buy side to plan, buy, report, measure, and do attribution consistently. If you don't have those 3 things on the top, those 3 big boxes, pulled together, and it doesn't necessarily be one stack necessarily, but they have to integrate and talk to each other consistently. This is what will bring the TV world into a more frictionless way. Because coming from the digital side into TV, I will tell you, I was surprised at how a $70 billion industry transacted there's a lot of friction in the transaction that, if made more efficient from the buy-side perspective, I think will help drive the dollars from digital back into television. And the only way to do this also is, I know that we talk about how markets are different and continents are different and all that sort of stuff. You never hear that come from the giants on the digital side, right? And that's because the world is actually becoming very, very small now that everybody's connected. And so, yeah, there's always nuances. There's nuances in digital also between markets and between continents. It doesn't preclude creating a global platform to make transactions happen. Because if you're a major global brand that is transacting in the world, you want the data that you're using to look as consistent as possible across all regions. Otherwise, it's really difficult to stitch together a global view of what you're doing from a marketing perspective if everything looks really, really different. So the supply side, heard this, you hear this multiple times a day. There is so much fragmentation in the market right now, right? Consumers have so many options of where to consume media, how to consume media, on what device, et cetera. This makes it complicated, right, in the market. So going back to the slide, the framework slide, pulling supply together in a consolidated fashion is the way you defragment the fragmented. There's no way to do it other than to actually pull it into a single place and give the buy side a view of all of that supply as if it's a single publisher from an optics perspective. The demand side. I most recently came out of Group M. I was with WPP for 11 years, and most recently I was the CEO of M Platform, which was the global technology infrastructure and services and analytics group of Group M globally. And what were we doing? Well, a lot of what me and my team were working on was taking the largest media buyer in the world, and it was very people-based. It was hard to scale, right? When we had a new client, you added people. You couldn't create really easy efficiency, and it was hard. Workflow is hard, right? But we are becoming, as an industry, much more technology-based. This is not new. Everybody knows this in this room. This is just a friendly reminder, right? And so this part is the creating less friction in the transaction. That's all it is. We have to create less friction in the transaction. And the buy side is doing it on their side, right? You hear about what the agencies are doing to create efficiencies in how they operate. Supply side's doing the same right now, right? So we're in this kind of really transformational time, I think, into how we are going to market, both on the buy and sell side, that will also help with the friction. But that's there. But the way that you can answer from the demand side is actually make it easier and more efficient for them to buy as much supply as possible through a single interface. So if you look at this is very US focused, because that's where NCC currently operates. But if you think back, the vast majority of this slide, if I would have shown it to you 13 years ago, would not have been up here. Most of those logos didn't exist, right? So this is the fragmentation. It's gotten complicated, right? It was basically like it was like the traditional, from the US perspective, traditional broadcasters, traditional pay TV, and then nothing else really was there at that time, right? And so that's not that long ago. So there's so much fragmentation. It gets complicated for the buy side to keep up. And every individual, as big as some of these brands look on a slide and how we talk about them, individually, none of them are big enough to be interesting to the buy side. They don't individually have enough scale to matter. And so the pulling together of supply is really what will help, again, minimize that friction, right? Make it easy for the buy side to reach audiences across everywhere. And by the way, it doesn't mean that brands lose their secret sauce, because there's secret sauce in data, there's secret sauce, but interfaces can solve for that, right? So what we're doing, we don't have all of it, all of the boxes at this point, but working on it. But we're starting to pull together and consolidate big groups of supply. right? So that top right box, that supply box, this is where we are today. And then the idea would be that, as much as the logos that we can box around as possible, right? Because our sort of mantra at NCC, our go-to-market, is going back to our history, the reason we've been successful in becoming a $2 billion company is we've pulled together an aggregated supply to make it easy in a fragmented world 20 years ago for the demand side to buy. This is just a new version of the fragmentation. It's the second chapter of the same story, right? And in 20 years, there's going to be some other version. But that's where we sit right now. Data. So again, coming from the digital side into TV, there's so much data. There's more data in TV than there is in digital, which I was naively surprised to know, right, when I came over. And where I was also surprised is there's no consistency in it. Zero. Set-top box data, no consistency. Everybody does it differently. So again, going back to how do we make a frictionless environment for the buy side, right, to drive dollars to the supply side so it's mutually beneficial on both sides, is we have to create consistency in the data. Data can't look different from every seller to the buy side, and in order to eliminate friction, right? It has to start looking the same. So a lot of what we're doing at NCC, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is we're pulling together, we're aggregating data across our owners and some of our affiliates to actually make it look consistent, right? Even though everybody uses their own systems, there's ways that you can make from the buy side look very consistent, put a UI over it, and create a seamless way for the buy side to work. It's not easy, it's actually fairly complicated, but it's doable. And that's a lot of what we're working on as well. So scale matters. So we know it's difficult for brands to find audiences. We know we need to scale data. It doesn't mean, because everybody says, especially because I came in digital, like, okay, 2 days ago somebody actually mentioned this, making TV look like digital is a mistake because digital was a disaster in the consumer experience. Creating that platform does not mean you have to create a similar consumer experience from the digital side into TV, right? You can park sort of the sins of digital and still implement the best of digital. So, I think we talk about things as ors, like we can't do what digital did because they have fraud and consumers hate advertising in digital and blah, 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 blah. This is not an or, right? This is take what we have. They've done some, when I was there, we did some things really, really well that helped create a marketplace in a very, very efficient way. And so we should sort of take the best from that and then move it into television. So here's where we are. So this is some of the inventory that we currently work with on the supply side. We work with Cheddar U and Roku as well. That's on the linear side. On the addressable side, we have started to put together the largest addressable marketplace in the US. Lucky enough, because of the 3 owners that we have and some of our affiliates, this is where we are so far. If I come back next year, this will look substantially more robust as well, because we're just starting. We talk about addressable, it's really just starting, right? There's still so much more opportunity. But we have a really substantial footprint in addressable, and our sort of mantra at NCC, it's not addressable or linear. Our mantra is we're going to pull everything together. Because linear television is not going away anytime soon. We can't move our eye off the ball there. The combination of linear and digital and addressable makes things really, really interesting, because if you have addressable, you're able to target. That does not mean that you have to go to performance immediately, right? Brand advertising in television should not go away. I think one of the sins that we should not repeat from the digital side is that once we had the ability to micro-target in digital, we did it a little too much, really, really fast. So this idea of kind of creating the brand advertising, full funnel, top of the funnel, but also have the ability to measure the lower part of the funnel is the opportunity for television. It allows for the full funnel in a way that digital does not. So I think this change from a data perspective and addressability in television is going to be the catalyst that swings the market back to television. And I'll tell you why. And this is just my example, but I'm sure everybody in this room has an example. So you have set-top box data that becomes, if you have enough of it, census level, right? When people turn on their TV, turn off their TV, what shows they watch, if they saw an ad, if they actually viewed a show, if it's a media and entertainment client, for example. In our case, we also have, because of our ownership, we have the IP, household IP targeting. So we at NCC, why I'm so excited about being there, is that we have a way to connect linear television, addressable television, and digital in a way that no other company can't, including the digital giants. Because once you have the connection into the IP to the household, we can actually show an ad on a television screen, whether linear or addressable, and then actually target that household digitally through their IP. So if we see the click in digital, we actually know that we showed them an ad first in television, or 2 ads or 3 ads, right? So this is bridging the gap between linear, addressable, and digital, because it's not just about linear, it's not just about addressable, and it's not just about digital. It's the marriage of these 3 things that really is what brands need, right? They're not looking at things in these individual boxes anymore. They need to see a holistic view of their whole marketing budget. This is a big reason I took the job at NCC, because I've never seen a company that had this at scale, and the ability to marry, at least from the US perspective, the television and digital side in this way, in a census level view. So this type of connection of data is what's going to drive the market in television back, right? Because this is not a digital can target better than TV. This is TV can target as well as digital and vice versa. And not only that, but we can marry the 2 together. And know if we targeted a household in television and then they converted in digital, TV can actually take credit for that transaction in a way that it couldn't before, right? Which is why the attribution and that slide, which I'll show in a little bit, the attribution piece of the puzzle in that framework slide is really, really important, right? The ability to create attribution in television through a full funnel is what's going to swing the pendulum back. So it's a big concentration for us as well. So, from the addressable side, it's actually not that different, frankly, from the world I came from in digital, right? You have, typically there's a first-party audience that the brands bring with them. We work with some really major brands in the state, like Discover and Target and others. Match them with third-party data sets, match them to our footprint, activate the media, and then do the measurement with partners like Data Plus Math and 605 on the back end. It is getting easier to do this than it was a year ago, because I saw some of the work we did a year ago, and even within a year we've made huge strides. There's still a lot of manual process that goes into addressable. I don't care who says their secret sauce, don't believe them. Anybody who does addressable knows this. So there's a lot of, it's moving in the right direction, but there's still a lot of manual work that needs to get done. Like matching of data sets, for example, sometimes takes days. Pulling the reporting out at the end sometimes takes a week or more. And so going back to the digital world, in digital, the matching does take time in the digital world still, because it's the same players that do the matching in digital and TV. On the measurement side, it's much, much faster in digital. So I think we have some work to do on the TV side, making sure that we can surface reporting faster for brands, because they can only sort of get smarter from the buy side the faster we get reporting out from the sell side. That make sense? So that's another thing we're working with our owners and affiliates on, how we can surface the reporting data faster, serve it back to the buy side so that the buy side will buy more faster, right? The slower we are getting the data to them, the harder it is for them to keep buying the media from the learnings. The other thing is, from the data perspective, that sort of middle layer of data is, set-top box from a buy side, and I know this might be a little bit controversial of a comment, But the buy side, much like digital, sometimes they care about exactly where they're buying content, but as long as they're buying quality content, they really want to hit the audience that they want, right? And so some of like the brand pieces, brand equity doesn't go away here, but it's important that we balance individual brands with the importance of making sure that the market ecosystem works properly, if that makes sense, right? And if you think about on the digital side, the really high quality digital publishers are still part of supply ecosystems. It doesn't mean they lose their brand equity. It just means that they become a piece of the puzzle, because nobody's the whole puzzle, as much as we want to think we are, right? Everybody's a piece, but working together is really, really important, because the pieces together make the powerful platform, right? Pieces broken apart doesn't help anybody. I talked about that already. What I wanted to just show here quickly, and this is a US perspective, but in the US, the buy side thinks very clearly about local, regional. So local would be like the pizza store on the corner, in suburban New Jersey or something. Regional would be a group of car dealerships. National would be obviously across the US footprint. But global is really what we need to do. So the reason I'm so excited to be here is hear about what everybody's doing on this side of the pond too. Because Google is not a US only platform, right? And so I think a lot of the heft of television from the buy side is actually going to be, we do things on the other side of the pond, you do things on this side of the pond, and we work together as closely as possible to make things piece together, because the global marketers actually want the pieces to fit together, not just on a national level or regional level, but actually on a global level as well. So it's a lot of what we're concentrating on as well. But we all have a lot to do in our own markets, but that should be sort of our North Star as an industry, I think. And the last thing I'll say is, I love this quote, because when I came 6 months ago into the job and I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, we should do this, and this. Nicolle, I know you're a digital girl, but TV doesn't work that fast, is what I was told. And what I will say is just, coming from where I did, the industry is moving fast on the digital side, and I think we have sort of seized the moment in the TV world, because change is really, really slow, and then boom, something's going to happen, and we're going to have to jolt. So I just think the opportunity is huge. I'm super excited to be here. This is my contact information. If anybody, I saw people taking pictures of slides. If you want the actual slide, I'm happy to send them to you. But there's my contact information. Thank you so much.